Hello everyone, welcome back to HPG Engage podcast. This is episode 2 of Medical Musings. My name is Gemma Staddon and with me today are Davina, Ocansey-Gibson and Erin Cox, all from HPG.
So hi everyone, we're really excited to be here today with some incredible guests.
Hi.
Hi! So that's right, we're joined by Daniel Thurley, Matt Britland and Orin Chisholm, and welcome to the Medical Musings podcast.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Theme song.
Thanks for coming along.
Pending, yeah.
So if you're looking to upskill or break into the healthcare industry, then you are in the right place. Stick with us as we dive into today's topic.
Yeah, so let's kind of kick off by getting to know our guests a little bit better. So Matt, did you want to maybe start by introducing yourself and giving us a quick summary of your background?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for inviting us in. It's wonderful to be here. So my name's Matt Britland. I'm the Managing and Medical Director of Medwise Consulting. I actually started very bizarrely. If you look at my background, it's kind of atypical, really, I think, in today's eyes, but I think tomorrow's eyes probably not, because what medical affairs is really where I've spent most of my time. And we have traditional medical affairs, which was the SD medical affairs, and sort of modern medical affairs, where a smorgasbord of people come from. So my background, I don't think, is going to be too atypical in the future. But I started as a nurse in the late 90s, a nurse consultant, and then an early nurse practitioner. And I had a lot of drug reps coming up to me, and I was like, what's this? They drive nice cars, much nicer than my car. What is this? And I've started to try and understand the industry a little bit more, and we'll talk a bit about how I got in later on, I think. But I was really fascinated, and I thought, well, maybe I could go and do something that is not just looking, treating a patient as they come in and out. It's something a bit different. I was really fascinated in all the drugs. Every time I gave a drug, I used to learn it and get the IBs, the investigation brochures. And I found my way into industry by I got to Australia just to get it out of my system, and I was going to go back and finish my practitioner's work, and then I fell in love with Australia. And I went, oh, okay. I looked back at nursing. Nursing was probably 20, 30 years behind the UK, so I decided not to, and got into industry. Wrote to 50 or so companies, one person at Sanofi phoned me back, and I got into a sales role. Didn't know what medical affairs was at that point. And then just worked my way up. I found 2 very good people who helped me, and I'm not just saying that, but one of them's on my left and one of them's on my right. The one on my right actually gave me my first role in medical affairs, and suggested to me that I speak to the person on my left, and look at my training, my training and academically what to do. And there was a very good course in pharmaceutical medicine and drug development at the University of New South Wales, run by the great Dr. Orin Chisholm. Did that, got into medical affairs, went way up, loved it. Found a gap, and that's what medical affairs do. We find gaps and we fill gaps. I found a gap because I thought there was no consulting company that just does medical affairs and patient affairs. Filled the gap, and that's pretty much me.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I didn't realise that Dan, you were the first person to give Matt the first role in the industry.
Yeah.
How interesting. Good connection there then. Love that.
Yeah, thanks Matt. What about you, Orin? What's your story so far?
So I'm currently the Program Director for the Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Development Programs, postgraduate programs at the University of Sydney. So I've moved over from UNSW. I started out my career down the very traditional research track. So I did my undergraduate degree in biochemistry, honours in biochemistry, worked for a couple of years in a research laboratory, then went back to Children's Medical Research Institute and did my PhD in oncology, looking at oncogenes and their role in the formation of various leukemias. Did several postdoctoral appointments overseas and around Australia. Got up to a point where I thought, I'm sick of chopping up mice and doing lab work. So what else can I do? And I looked around for other roles that could still use my scientific background and knowledge that I had. And so I moved into my first role in industry at Wyeth, in regulatory affairs. So I absolutely loved regulatory affairs, and I still do. I still do some consulting in it. It was great because you could still get into the depths of the science for the products. You had to understand how the products were manufactured, all the different studies, clinical and non-clinical studies that were done to support the dossier, because you were in charge of submitting that dossier of information to the TGA and liaising with them to get the product approved in Australia. So I really enjoyed that, and I spent a number of years in regulatory roles at various companies, both large and small, US-based, European-based companies, mostly working in women's health initially, and then also into oncology and rare diseases. After 12 or 13 years in industry, I saw a position advertised at UNSW to teach people to get into industry. So I thought that might be quite useful, because all the way along I'd still been doing a little bit of guest lecturing at various universities, and I thought that would be really good to be able to help younger people get into industry, because it is really difficult. When I moved into industry back in 2000, it was extremely rare for someone to have a PhD in industry, but I had a really supportive manager in the team that I moved into, and she was very willing to give someone with a PhD a go in regulatory affairs, and sent me on various training courses as well. So she was really supportive and a great mentor to me through my career. So then I moved over to UNSW. There was already an established program there, and so I revised it and restructured it into the Master of Pharmaceutical Medicine program. When COVID hit, the university closed a number of programs down across the university, and that was one of them, even though I'd been growing the program really well. And so then I moved back into a consulting role for a year, helping out various companies getting products through the FDA or getting their GMP licenses here in Australia, etc. And then there was a competitor program at Sydney University, and the team that started that program all moved off during COVID as well. They all moved off and set up a startup company in GMP manufacturing. And then so they were looking for someone to take on the role, so I moved in and took over the role at Sydney Uni.
And doing an excellent job, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I've restructured the program again. The team that ran it originally, had a great program, but it was really focused on very early stage drug development, whereas most of the people coming into the program were looking at later stages like clinical roles, pharmacovigilance, medical affairs, regulatory kind of roles within industry. So I've moved it a bit further along the continuum so that we're providing education around medical affairs, around pharmacovigilance, regulatory affairs, clinical, etc. So I think it's more attuned to the population of students that are coming into the program.
You sound incredibly passionate about it, Orin, which is so nice. It just comes out you naturally, which is lovely. Awesome, thank you for that. That's lovely. And finally, Dan,
hi.
Tell us a bit about you.
Sure. So I'm Associate Professor and Academic Director for Sydney Health Executive Education. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's the group within the Faculty of Medicine and Health at University of Sydney that runs all the short courses and micro-credentials. So we have around 100 courses out there with training thousands of people each year in really short courses which give people a head start and a leap forward in what they're trying to achieve in their career. My original background, I trained as a physician in the UK. I was working in medical oncology, but got really curious around some of the things that were happening in the digital space. So actually my first job stepping out of the NHS was actually for a startup tech company that was looking to create a route for clinicians to come together and talk about difficult cases and an avenue for what really was kind of medical affairs. And I hadn't realised at that time the role that I was doing was the medical education within that for all doctors around the UK. I stepped back into the NHS and was working quite a lot in clinical trials. And one of those was for a new monoclonal antibody for colorectal cancer in medical oncology, which is my passion. And the pharmaceutical company asked would I join them. So it was because I'd been an investigator on their pivotal study. They said, would you like to join us? So I worked for Merck at the time, which became Merck Serono later. But my main career in pharma over the last 20 years has been with Roche. So at one ASCO meeting, Roche said, would you like to join Roche and leave Merck to work for another product at the time, which was called Avastin. That was a direct competitor to the previous product, so I said no. But then they offered me another product, which was Mabthera. So I became the global medical lead for medical affairs for Mabthera and helped develop some of the clinical trials, which is now the standard of care for treating people with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma around the world, still is today. Yeah. And from that, I had a great sort of global career. I came to Australia, was medical director here for Roche for 5 years or so, which is when I met Matt, actually, and had the opportunity to help people advance their careers. Roche asked me then to be medical director in the UK, so I was medical director in the UK for 5 years, and had enjoyed being on the leadership team, seeing how the whole business ran. So I took a step into general management. So I moved to be general manager in New Zealand for Roche, and then general manager for Roche in Hong Kong. And that was through COVID, national security law, all the time that I was there, with some incredible challenges to sort of help navigate sanctions on Carrie Lam, who I met every 2 weeks or so, helping to design the next 5 years of Hong Kong's healthcare. And at the end of COVID, Roche offered me an opportunity to go to the Netherlands, but I decided I didn't want to move again, because actually moving so many times, it was hard to stay connected with friends, particularly after a long period of time of no travel with COVID. So I moved back to Australia and left Roche, and was fortunate enough to be offered a role by Robin Ward at the University of Sydney to lead the academic portion of this group.
So interesting. Yeah. I had no idea all the movements though, and all the kind of travel that you've done as part of your role. So
fascinating.
yeah.
Well, doing tax returns in 5 countries at one time is not great.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Ideal.
I can imagine. Where was your favourite place to live? I feel
Australia.
Like was it? Yeah, okay, and that's why.
Like,
Yeah,
I have to come back.
That's a good answer.
Second was Hong Kong.
Okay.
Third was New Zealand.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
sharing.
that overview. Okay, excellent. So next, let's turn to Matt. Can you give us a bit of an overview of Medwise and the programs that are offered through Medwise Academy and Stepwise, please?
Yeah, so Medwise Consulting, again, it was something I've wanted to do for a long time when I was in industry. I think I mentioned earlier, you look for gaps and you find gaps in medical affairs, we look for gaps in evidence and fill it with evidence generation plans, and gaps in knowledge we fill with education. You know, it was just the thing I wanted to do for such a long time, and so Medwise Consulting was born about 18 months ago. Focuses really on 3 areas: medical affairs consulting, but also people that want medical affairs skills and attributes that we'll talk about in the competency framework to move health, to really, really drive patient outcomes. The whole basis of the business model is underpinned by the National Medicines Policy. So we looked at the National Medicines Policy, we identified quality use of medicine in the centre. On the circle outside of the quality of the National Medicines Policy, you can see what needs to be done, and you can see the stakeholders. And actually, so we work across pharma, biotech, we work with lawyers, insurance companies, we're lead consultants on Omicos Prospect. So we've got various different clients on purpose. Anybody that wants to move health. And that's medical affairs. Patient affairs is a separate part of Medwise, which again, when I was working clinically at the Christie Hospital and in industry, I was like, all this great science is fantastic, but if you can get a patient and carer to comprehend what's going on, I am sure medicine's going to work better. And we never test that really in clinical trials. We test drug A and B. We don't really test drug A plus really good education versus drug A versus drug B. But I'm absolutely convinced that if we can educate and raise health literacy and make sure, particularly for chronic diseases and diseases like cancer, that patients comprehend what's going on, I think we can do much better. And so we've got a whole department of patient affairs that literally just try and break glass ceilings in patient centricity. I heard it verbatim, ad nauseum in industry. We're patient centric, we put patients first. I never saw it. I really never saw people actually tangibly trying to educate patients, particularly in trials and early access programs, pre-TGA. So that's an area, but the big area of passion for me is the learning development and capabilities, which is why we're here today. So again, plumbers have more standards than medical affairs people, right? Apart from Dan. But in general, if you look across the hundreds of thousands of medical affairs people now, and there's been a complete changing of the guard in terms of investment into sales and marketing versus medical affairs. You can see the investment of medical affairs has incredibly grown. And the value that now medical affairs is delivering to healthcare professionals and patients is getting quite tangible as well. But really, there's really no standards, so we all sort of fall into this, and there's nothing there. Orin's course has been fantastic, and there's King's and the one that Dan did, but there's nothing specific for medical affairs. So we're focusing on learning development capabilities. We've got Stepwise, which is when we go into companies, and we went into 20 this year, and built workshops for medical affairs teams to really, because we've also benchmarked medical affairs. And medical affairs is building an evidence base. So if you look at all the stuff that's been published in peer-reviewed journals or tier 1, 2 journals in the last 3 years on medical affairs versus the hundreds of years prior to that, since medical affairs really started coming. And medical affairs has been around since probably thalidomide and earlier, like the 50s. But really there's been nothing published. It's been market research. You can see so much being published, and there's almost an evidence base and a best practice. And that's really what we do with Stepwise. We go into companies, we often go in and do some diagnostics of their medical affairs department. We say you need to do this, that and the other, and do workshops for them. Medwise Academy, which launches today, is again, thank you so much. It's been several months of work, and this is and again, one of my big frustrations. I've either managed or nurtured or coached, I don't know, 300-400 people over it's one of the things I've done continuously. At any time, I'll be developing 3 people for the last 15 years into roles. Every single day, somebody on LinkedIn reaches out and goes, how do I get into medical affairs? I didn't see there was anything out there that was any good. To help bridge this gap. When you talk to fantastic recruiters like HPG, often they get briefed by companies saying, please don't bring me anybody without experience because it's going to take 18 months to build up. So we thought, well, rather than, we always talk about onboarding. I was like, well, what about pre-boarding? What about actually building a platform that people can self-directly go and understand what the industry is and how to get these roles and really develop something which is good and useful and doesn't cost the world. And so we've built Medwise Academy.
Max, so could you share a little bit more about the skills that Medwise Academy focuses on for those looking to enter the industry? So I know that we are going to be covering the competency framework a little bit later on, but just in terms of the overarching skill set that you're looking to impart to new starters.
It's more about just breaking down a big firewall and really showing aspiring candidates from all different walks of life how to get into industry. So it's a real showcase around what the industry is. The Medwise Academy that launched yesterday is 10 hours of content split across 25 little modules. So it's very self-directed. You have to actually sequentially do it. So there's tests and certificates as you go. And by the end of it, your head is just full of awareness about the industry, which is one of the big issues, is a lack of awareness of what the industry is. And a Medwise Pro, when that comes out, is more about actually how to, really how to get the roles, this pre-boarding I mentioned. So imagine people going for a role that have done 40 hours of training across what these industry is. Plus also what we've done, which I think is quite cool, is create almost like a Netflix of medical affairs. So every time a paper, the ones I mentioned earlier, are published, so we published one the other week on general managers, that's going up as a podcast, and every publication that's open access, white paper, everything of interest and relevance is going onto that website, and so people can have a close community. Then every month we're going to have open Q&As where aspiring medical affairs people or industry people, because we also tell them about other roles, particularly in medical affairs. There's certainly not just the MSL role, and that's 90% of people think, but there's also a plethora of other roles in industry. So that's what the Academy is, and it's going to be very active. We're going to reach out to the universities, but really we're focusing on the skills and capabilities that really come into the University of Sydney partnership. I think this is very much for aspiring people who want to get into industry. And yes, we'll cover some of the skills and capabilities, but the deep dive of skills and capabilities is why we've partnered with the University of Sydney to really make sure this is, has academic standing. But it's exciting. It's very exciting.
And then, like you said, it's all tied into that competency framework as well, which they'll see throughout their career and be able to check off those boxes where they think they're missing something. So it really, I can see, I know it's at beginning stages, but you've already done a full circle sort of plan of how it's going to work for someone from the very ground up right through to the end of their career.
I suppose reflecting on your journey, how do you think completing, I suppose, one of these courses would give someone an advantage when they start in the industry from coming out of say, university, for example?
Yeah, I mean, nobody teaches you how to get into industry. There's very little sort of career ladders, and so again, this pre-boarding, which is actually a word we've completely invented, would help me tremendously. I've effectively 49 rejections when I first started because I didn't hear back. When I got into medical affairs, I think it would have just given me, because I did go for several medical roles at Sanofi, I didn't get them. I think if I'd have not got into sales and I'd have done this, I'd have tried to go straight into medical. As much as I loved the sales side, like it would have given me this awareness that I didn't have now. And so I think that would have just driven me into medical affairs immediately.
And just to confirm the programs and when they're live, so stepwise we've already got up and running.
Yeah, stepwise has been going all year,
yeah.
And we've worked at 20 companies roughly that we've gone in, and that's been fantastic. And we do the benchmarking and the capabilities as well. So we literally spent 2 months at one company interviewing all their teams and suggesting how they might want to modernise the medical affairs department and do things a bit differently, which was cool. Medwise Academy 365, which is the cost, plus also a 365 degree view of medical affairs, plus also it's a year subscription, so you get access not just these 10 hours, but also all this building, the Netflix stuff. And then Pro kicks off sometime mid next year.
So let's talk about the exciting collaboration with Sydney University. So Orin and Dan, can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, how this partnership came about in the first place?
Well, I think the partnership started from the three of us working together with several medical directors and other medical affairs professionals to look at creating a competency framework, to actually write down what is it that you need to know to be great in medical affairs. And it took 18 months because we wanted to get it right, and we wanted to test it, and we wanted to trial it. And we've had the opportunities to trial the competency framework in companies, getting feedback from people. Does it fit? Does it work? And certainly, Orin, this is one of your academic areas of excellence. You can probably speak more clearly than me on that. But the partnership for moving to us working together collaboratively in teaching courses was from our passion of doing this and the understanding that there was nothing out there for people to move that forwards. At least nothing that was consistent. Some companies do parts of it. Some companies do none of it. And what companies do teach is often different in different companies. But if you're going to be having a career, it's quite unusual to be staying in just one company. And having this ability also to network at the courses, to meet people, to discuss, is another great opportunity about how bringing people together rather than just in a company-centered workshop, this can sort of add value. I don't know, Orin, Matt, do you maybe want to say more?
Yeah, I guess the research aspects behind developing the competency framework really grew out of students asking me how to get into industry roles and what kind of skills do I need to move from a sales role to a medical affairs role or any other roles within industry. And so I started working, originally I was working with Lois Meyer from UNSW. We developed a competency framework for clinical research associates that was funded by MTP Connect. under the MRFF funding arrangements, and then ARCs have actually taken that and then developed their more generalist competency framework from that one. But I saw that we could also apply similar thinking to medical affairs roles, because there wasn't really anything out there to help people guide their career development, or even to understand what they needed to know to actually get into these roles. Everyone, you know, they've all got the skills in the deep science, but they don't understand all of the other aspects of the role and what other skills that they need to get into those roles. And so that's when we brought the team together through MAPA as one of their working groups to build the competency framework and set some of those foundations down so that people could actually see what the skills were for that particular role, and then going on from the basic kind of foundational level and novice level, moving up to intermediate, advanced and expert within that area. And doing it, I looked at a number of other competency frameworks. So I'm a member of RAPS, which is the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society in the US, and they have a really well-developed competency framework as well. And actually, you know, getting fellowship of RAPS, you need to show how you meet the expert levels on their competency framework. So I thought we could use similar kind of levels for the medical affairs one here in Australia. So that's what we've been working on.
We've got a vision one day that on, you know, PDs and job adverts out there for medical affairs roles, be they MSL, medical advisor, medical director, and the smorgasbord of other roles that are going to be bred into medical affairs, that actually say, these are highly desirable, University of Sydney, qualifications, short courses, microcredit, and actually standardise, bring standards into a profession, because to be a profession, you need standards.
Yeah, it's very true, isn't it? Yeah.
It's almost like you're taking those original, you know, maybe science or pharmacy degrees and translating it into the real life skills that people need for the real life jobs that there will be in the pharmaceutical industry, and you like bridging that gap.
The other thing that can be confusing for people entering industry is the different names that different companies give to similar jobs.
Yes.
However, if you're able to say that this role mapped against the competency framework is this, this and this and this, then you have a level playing field to understand what the skills and competencies are for roles. So it actually makes whatever a company's name less important than do you have the skills and competencies, which is actually what you interview for. You don't interview for somebody having a job title, you say, can you do it? And can you do it is, do you have these skills and competencies, which would be laid out very clearly, and you'll be able to have evidence against it. And the courses from University of Sydney come as a reference that actually you have done that, rather than somebody who could be your friend saying, yeah, they did that. So this is an impartial standard that also when you guys as recruiters, you know, you're putting your professional name on the line saying this person can do it. Hopefully the piece of paper from the University of Sydney will say, and we have independent verification that they have and can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to add a lot of value into this space, I think, isn't it? Yeah, it's brilliant.
And it's going to completely evolve, you know, it's going to continuously evolve as the roles evolve. We imagine there's going to be, you know, domains on there on AI and machine learning and patient engagement, you know, all these things as the roles evolve, and that's the great thing about this.
It's change just in this space though, isn't it? So what it looks like now might look totally different in like 12 months' time.
Yeah, a year in medical affairs now used to be like a decade in medical affairs a couple of decades ago. So.
And that's the other thing with competency frameworks, they're not fixed in stone. You need to constantly revise them and update them as new technologies and new ways of working come into being, and incorporate those into it. So we've tried in developing the framework at this point in time, look a few years ahead and see where medical affairs is going down the track, and make sure we've tried to capture some of those aspects into the competency framework. Yeah.
Making sure it's not just theory, but it's all being put into practice so that they can actually apply in terms of their day-to-day and stuff. So yeah, no, that's great.
Brilliant. Okay, lovely. And I guess it'd be good to just understand about the specific courses, or I suppose because you've spoken a little bit about micro-credentials as well. So just for the listeners, what is on offer for people? Yeah.
So how we're starting out is at the level 1, the novice level of education. So this is foundational. And this will be useful for people who are maybe thinking about stepping into a different role in medical affairs if they're already in one, or for people who are looking to take their first step in at an official level. So this would be coming in at the competency level 1. There are no exams. There's online learning, there's live webinars, you get to chat to people and discuss. There are what are called formative exams, like you answer the questions and it tells you there and then yes or no, but there isn't a pass mark. So it's, you answer the radio dots and you say correct and gives you a bit more information. It's very much based on adult learning, so you're not just clicking and opening up 30,000 words of PDFs. There are short snippet videos, there's interactive activities, and particularly for the communication and collaboration workshop, there's online practice of and examples and workshop of how to do that. So we didn't think we could run a communication and collaboration workshop purely online on your own at home, which is why this one launches with a webinar as part of it. So all of the domains will be covered as our first wave, but then the second wave will be focusing on level 2 so actually when you're moving up and demonstrating a higher degree of competency. The first level is more around awareness and with some stepping into demonstrating you can do it. The micro-credentials will actually have assessments in them, will actually then be able to be a standardized way to say, yes, you can communicate this in a way that it was compelling or was clear. Or in some of the areas around regulatory framework, you have some basic knowledge that will enable you to make informed decisions around regulatory choices and strategy. So they'll be building on level 1, and there'll be the second phase of courses coming through. The benefit then of a micro-credential, you have actually, for people who are keen on LinkedIn, you get a digital badge, which using tech jargon is a non-fungible token, which means that you can demonstrate and you can't cheat, you can't build them without the University of Sydney or other micro-credential provider. That means that you were awarded that for your exam, and you can post it and share that you have independent verification that you are level 2 at this domain on this date. We're also planning what levels 3 and 4 will be, but looking in the first 18 months, I think, of launching these, with the first course going live in April next year. There'll be the level 1s followed by the level 2s.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to hear it's not just limited to medical affairs, like you say, but that's kind of where it was born in that sense. Yeah. Okay.
And I said, when you pass these micro-credential exams, so that the first course is launching don't have exams, they have self-check quizzes. The second ones will have assessments, which doesn't mean sitting in a room writing an essay at a desk. That hasn't been like that at the University of Sydney for a very long time. So there's multiple different ways that assessments can happen. You'll get these digital badges, and the digital badges provide credit to award courses, which means you are putting in your pocket credit towards, if you wanted to do a master's, you'd be doing these courses now, and when you later enroll in an award course, you may already have done a third of the master's. So if over these next 5 years you did all of these courses, you could find yourself your quarter, a third, a fifth of a way through to actually getting letters after your name. I've got a graduate certificate in medical affairs, etc. So it's actually building as those courses become reality with the need. So people who really want to be at the front of what they're doing probably should be enrolling in these courses to get the feel for it, and then as the micro-credentials come out, either decide themselves to take on board and do it, or to work with their employer to see, can this be part of their development plan? The next year maybe I do these 2, because that's going to really set me up for successful promotion, for expansion into a regional role, a managerial role, and it's easy for the managers to actually then say that's why this person was promoted.
Yeah, absolutely.
The PD side's important. I think the IDP or PD, whatever you want to call it, I think that is important, because historically, again, when I was in industry, unless it was just me, and everybody listening is like, no, that's just you, but I've managed a lot of people, and I've been managed by people, and IDPs typically, you get them out at the same day you get your Christmas tree out. You just get them out at the end of the year, and it's a little bit tick box sometimes. And this really is giving employees and companies very tangible frameworks to develop people. and you can see them develop. And to Dan's point, you know, that's a conversation you can then have with promotions and development. But it's in this stepwise, not stepwise, but you know, stepped kind of way. And I'd have loved this as when I was a medical director with my team to be able to use this. And I think, Orin, maybe you can share in a bit how it's been tested, because I think that was very good insights, right? How it was
Because I mean, if I look at my colleagues when I was a medical manager starting out, the marketeers would go off to marketing courses. This, you know, or people would move to do MBAs because it was seen as a commercial activity. Nothing in medical affairs apart from going to scientific conferences. But that's learning about the science, but it's not learning these other skills that those courses teach.
That's so important.
These courses will deliver that.
Yeah, more on those kind of the soft skills that kind of come with having to do all this as well, not just the technical focus.
People really have to realise that they've got to take the responsibility for developing their skills to develop their own careers. You can have those conversations with your manager as well, but it's really you're the one that's driving your career and the directions that you want to take it in. And so being able to do those self-assessments against the framework is going to be really valuable for people in doing, you know, planning out their career and their next moves and where they want to go. We've had a couple of companies testing out the framework as part of developing the framework and doing some pilot studies, and one of them in particular took the framework and actually built a dashboard based on the framework. They got all of their staff to self-assess against the framework, and then all of their managers assessed the staff members against the framework. They looked at all the roles within their company in medical and what levels of each competency they expected someone at each level to have, and then they've plotted them and set up the a dashboard showing where each staff member is based, and so that really clearly identifies gaps in people's knowledge or competencies that they can then work with that particular individual to bring them up to the baseline that the company wants, and then also they can see where people are, you know, going above and beyond the baseline that they expect for that particular role, and then if they see people at that point, that might be a signal to the managers to think about promotion or moving into a different role for that particular person in the company, and they can initiate those discussions with the staff members as well. So it's really valuable for people, companies that don't have a framework already in place. But even some of the bigger companies have told us that they've only got frameworks for certain roles within their organisations, not for every single role. And so they see value in having this to have it more level across all of the different roles that they've got within their company.
And even all the companies as well, like we were saying before, if there was a benchmark across different companies, then you would be able to translate that when you're perhaps thinking about moving to another role.
It shows value, I think, even in, like, if as a company, if they invest in something like this as an employee, it shows value in them as well, you know. Like for me personally, if that was me in that scenario, knowing where I fall short, if it means that I can look to my career ahead and go, okay, I need to do this to get to here, I think that shows value in the employee.
I think bold companies will be those who say we'll support all of our employees to get to level 2 in all of the competency framework. I mean, companies that do that, you know that they've said that, they'll do that, and you know, you go and work there, work hard for maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and you come out with that proof. I think that would retain people in companies well, and the investment they put in will come from retention.
Yeah, definitely.
And they might be, they might send them off to short courses or micro-credentials or degrees at Sydney University, for instance. But they might also see that if they paired their staff member up with someone else who's higher on the competency framework, they can work with them to bring their skills up, or even placing them temporarily in another role to build up those skills and then bringing them back in. So there's lots of different ways to try and address the skills gaps and bringing people up. But you know, Sydney Uni, we're trying to really help fill some of those gaps.
Yeah, it's really about kind of streamlining things for people's development to make sure that
Yeah.
everyone knows what they need to do and how they need to kind of do that as well. And also it's really great support, I think, for the managers as well, to be able to identify where those gaps are and then to provide their employees with a bit of a roadmap on how to upskill everyone and give people those chance to be on a level kind of footing, I suppose. Yeah.
And it was very rewarding to see that one of the companies that took this on was piloting it, actually did it across APAC. So they did all of the China medical managers as well.
Wow.
And so we've seen that this is applicable internationally.
Yeah.
Potentially, although it's still in development, maybe the regulatory module, for example, of this, if it's going to be very TGA focused, we can discuss where that gets to. Maybe that won't be so relevant for somebody who's looking to have registration in China. All the rest are internationally applicable.
Yeah, like you said, everyone needs communication skills.
Business acumen.
Another thing about this, which differentiates it, I think, from company-specific competency frameworks, is this is an industry-fed competency framework, cross-sectionally from people across multiple companies with multiple backgrounds. And I think that gives a very unique perspective. I think, you know, we've all worked in companies, and after a while, you just know that company. But actually, you know, there's a whole industry out there, and that's why with MAPA and everything, that industry voice, is going to amplify it being a profession. And we would hope one day that somebody goes to university to literally go into a medical affairs role or another industry role, study to get in there, and it be seen as the profession, the wonderful profession it is. I've worked with the greatest scientists I've worked with are working in drug companies. You know, some of the greatest people I've worked at, and it's a wonderful career. I just can't believe I just fell into it. And everybody seems to fall into it. I'm like, well, people should be knowing about this at school or universities, particularly postgrads, right? So.
Yeah, that's good. Sound like the right people for the job, though. You're all very passionate about it, which is nice to hear. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Can you explain the different domains of the competency framework and how it helps learners understand the skills they need?
Yeah, so as Matt was saying, we actually went out to industry. We've had a number of workshops at MAPA summits and functions. We've done surveys, online surveys of industry members across Australia as well, to get all of that feedback and build the competency framework. And we've had a great team of MAPA members working together to build the framework, both people that are, you know, entry-level, junior people in medical affairs, but also really high-level medical directors that have been in the role for a significant amount of time. So we've got great perspectives coming in to build the framework. And so we've put together 6 domains at the moment. We're thinking whether we might divide one of them up into 2 domains and make 7, but at the moment that's the draft that we're working with. So our first domain is around scientific knowledge and technical knowledge, so that deep understanding of the science behind the products. What's the life cycle of a product, how are they developed, what's the therapeutic areas for the different products, just understanding that product-specific scientific knowledge. And then the second domain is evidence generation within medical affairs, so looking at your clinical trial designs, how they're conducted, how do you develop real-world data, real-world evidence generation, scientific publication writing, using database decision-making processes, critical evaluation of the literature, so all of those kind of aspects. Domain 3 is our compliance, governance and ethics domain, and so in this domain we're covering things like optimising the quality use of medicines, as Matt was talking about earlier, ensuring patient safety, compliance with all of the various codes of conduct, codes of practice, thinking about equity, diversity and inclusion aspects, leading ethical discussions and considerations, and I think it's critical that we have ethics embedded throughout all of our thinking and make sure that our staff really have a deep understanding of ethics and that ethics is always leading their thinking and discussions, and then the legal principles around compliance and governance, etc. So that's our third domain. The fourth one is around leadership, strategic vision and professionalism. So thinking about the strategy for developing your products, insights and vision around that strategic thinking, professional integrity, professional identity, building professional relationships, how to influence people, what are the impacts of different policy changes in the environment, and then things around self-management and continuous learning mindset, because we think that's critical for any role within industry going forward, and maintaining and understanding the medical affairs profession and its evolution and how it's growing and developing. So that's our fourth domain. The fifth domain is communication and collaboration, and as we've alluded to, this domain is critical across any role in industry. So people could come in and do the short courses or the micro-credentials in this domain, for instance, and move into any role in industry, showing that they've got those skills. So things around omni-channel communications, communication and interpersonal skills, multidisciplinary and interprofessional teamwork skills, because we all know, things just advance in teams and everyone's working in teams, and you need to be able to get along with each other and actually develop and deliver something at the end of the day. Engagement with patient organisations and communication and engagement with other external experts, covering that domain. And then the business knowledge domain, and again this is a general one that I think is really critical across any roles if you're moving into industry. So if you're coming from an academic environment into industry, that's probably the domain that you know the least about. So that is something that would be critical to try and develop if you're really intent on moving into an industry-based role. And so this domain is going to cover things like, or covers things like commercial knowledge, reputation of the company, reputation of the industry, finance and budgeting skills, digital technology integration, which is a massive driver at the moment, the role of therapeutics in improving health outcomes, how to assess and present product value, and knowledge and support of health economic submissions. So we all know it's really critical to get our products on the PBS or funded by MSAC, so through MSAC, so we need to have a good understanding of those commercial aspects of the business as well. And so they're the 6 domains that we've put together, and as we've said earlier, we've got different levels within each of those domains. So for every single subdomain that we've talked about, we've identified level 1, level 2, 3 and 4, so moving from novice, intermediate, advanced and expert within each of those different domains and subdomains.
It's interesting, there was a paper published by John Staddon, which I was fortunate to be part of, about what general managers want, business unit directors want from medical affairs, and it sort of come through in the thesis as well. And general managers are really important to medical affairs. If you've not got, and Dan was one, so he could probably allude to this, but if you've not got that advocacy of the general manager, it's very difficult to get the funding and the leverage for your medical affairs team. They're a crucial advocate. And John interviewed several 21 plus general managers, and what they think medical affairs needs to be. None of them said you should be more scientific, not one of them. They're like, that is now a license to operate, that's your entry level, that's what you need. Everybody said, and when we talk about, and certainly the thesis survey that's come back, the big gaps to really truly have the best medical affairs team are really these other domains. You can't have one without the other. It's a complete picture, a jigsaw of competency, and you need to fill it. So it was really interesting that this is what our peers are saying.
You're delivering based on that. No, it is it's fascinating just to hear all of the elements of it, but it makes a lot of sense as to why all of these come together to make a great skill set, I suppose, so it's great, it's exciting.
And we've covered quite a few of our topics kind of through this as well, but I suppose and we have touched on this a little bit, but for people who are already kind of working in the industry, how do you think this programme identifies the areas where they need to upskill? And I understand that you guys maybe have like a self-assessment tool, so how does that kind of operate and how does that work?
I mean, we've not built. We probably will. We'll talk about. I mean, I think the next step of this is how to build, how to digitalise it, and how to actually use AI, which is going to be a superpower for this. I think currently, as it stands, it's a self-development and a management development framework, which can then be integrated and used in companies in various different ways. I think we'll get there. I don't know. What do you think, Orin or Dan?
You actually probably raised a great idea about when people are coming to Sydney Health Executive Education, deciding which of the courses to do. Probably we can incorporate, have a look at this and decide which of the courses you should be taking. One of the great things that you actually be able to see when you go onto the courses is what are the learning outcomes. So what is it, if you do this course, by the end, you will be able to do. And when you're looking at the novice level, what you're able to do at the end of that is not as much as if you're actually completing and finishing level 2. So if you're going through and say, I can already do that, I can already do that, probably you flick ahead and say, well, I'm going to be doing level 2 because I can already do that. So the strength of that, it would give people guidance. The weakness is self-assessment. You don't see your own blind spots. So it's probably always good to be discussing this with somebody else, saying, I see myself as this, do you? But if people complete level 2 and pass the assessments, they can say, I am definitely at this level, and nobody can take that away from me. I may even be at 3 or 4, and maybe they'll be able to take the 3 or 4 levels as we develop those as well.
Well, it would be interesting, yeah, because I mean, so you go from a medical advisor to a medical director, for example, you might slip back, right?
Because it's not necessarily so relevant. I mean, when I moved from a medical manager managing a large team of people to medical director, I was then responsible for regulatory safety, quality. There is no way I needed to or had the in-depth scientific knowledge on every product. And particularly if I had been, I was responsible for just the oncology portfolio in Roche. Then when you move to be medical director and it's the whole portfolio, multiple sclerosis, ophthalmology, CNS, there are medical managers who are experts in that. So actually the competency and skills needed for a medical director will be a very different mix from somebody who is a medical manager. We would not expect them to have level 4 finance. Medical director, you probably need level 4 finance and maybe only level 2 science. You may have been level 4 in the past, but your role doesn't require it anymore. So it actually creates a very good discussion about just getting better at science won't make you a medical director. So these courses will help people sort of understand when they look at job descriptions, and if companies more standardise what do they expect of the medical director, they then start having a really rational conversation about, okay, well, are we selecting the right people, or do we have a bias for somebody who is great at science, but they'll never balance the budget and always be overspending, underspending, won't have project management skills, and so all the projects never deliver on time. So it's a great conversation to understand what's really important in those roles.
And there's a lot of talk about lateral moves as well, and again, Dan's a sort of poster child of this. Not many medical directors then become general managers, but we think we'll see more of that, and moving into business unit director roles, for example, like lateral moves. We think we'll see more of, and medical affairs is now giving birth to CEOs, who are seen global CEOs of companies coming through medical affairs, which I don't think really happened that long ago, but I can name several medical directors who are now global CEOs of major pharmaceutical companies.
So we've covered so much great information today. So for those listening, how can people apply for these courses, and where should they go for more information?
Sure. The courses are live to enrol and sign up today. So if you go and search for Sydney Health Executive Education, that'll take you to all of the courses that we offer that are short courses that you may be interested in. And you'll be able to find the Domain 5 Communication and Collaboration course in there. You click onto the link to enrol, but it'll also give you a whole lot more information in there about what are the learning outcomes, the names of the presenters who are presenting, and of course the courses take the best of the information from Medwise and from the University of Sydney's courses there for people to learn from. So you can go on now, Sydney Health Executive Education. You can then search for the Domain 5 Collaboration and Communication course and enrol.
So, as we've established, we are now in December. So, and with 2025 just around the corner, what key competencies or skills would you say are essential for someone looking to enter the industry next year?
Definitely team working, because you need to work in teams, so you need to be able to work with other people. And so really demonstrating that you've got those strong competencies in team working, collaboration, and then moving on to some of the other competencies that we'll be developing as well around business acumen, really understanding that, especially for those people that are coming from a non-industry background moving into industry, being able to show that they have some understanding of how an industry actually operates is really critical. That agile thinking and constant learning mindset, because the pace of change is so rapid these days. I think people really need to take on board that everything is going to be changing constantly, and they need to be able to adapt, be agile, learn new systems and processes, and help improve their efficiencies as they're going forward.
I think, I mean, the reason that we're doing communication as the first one is it's literally the most critical thing. So I think, you know, when I talk to new people who want to get into industry, again, typically they all look at the MSL role, and just some people are not suited to that role. You know, we have to be really honest, and they're not, and there's other roles. But, you know, one thing I say to people, any role in industry, whether you're a medical science liaison, medical advisor manager, or a medical director, your communication skills are completely pivotal. Your influencing skills, particularly communication skills. When you're an MSL, you could have the greatest scientific or medical mind in the world. If you can't communicate that and translate it into that person in front of you, and that could be a healthcare professional, increasingly it could be patient, could be government, could be a salesperson you're doing training to. If you can't translate that, then it's academic. I think that, as Orin said, that ability to work cross-functionally, to really get on with your sales team, your marketing team, the health ec team and the regulatory team, and really work as an organism that's really trying to do the same. That's again one thing that we see missing. And then the business acumen, you know, really understanding we're not employing science, you're not a scientist or a doctor in industry. You're working in a commercial institution with commercial imperatives. You just have to get your head around that. Once you've got all them, science, but not until. You have to earn that.
And I think an interesting part, which I think falls under business acumen for somebody looking to step into industry, even if they haven't got something they can point their finger to experience around, I've actually managed this budget, I've done these things. If they've never looked at the company website and seen what your business is, that for me was an instant no, and I wouldn't hire the person.
Yeah.
So one of the most discriminating, like good candidates versus not good candidates, have they actually done their research and know the therapy areas that the company's in. It doesn't take more than half an hour. But if people haven't done that half an hour to know the head office is in New York, it's in London, it's in Adelaide. If they haven't done that, I feel as if they have no commitment to understanding the business. So I don't need them to be able to write Excel spreadsheets and manage a budget, but if they haven't done that part of understanding the business, I think it signals other things that may be lacking in a candidate.
And we'll sort of try and point people to this, because again, as Dan's alluded to, one of the gifts that you've got on, you know, publicly listed websites for companies is investors reports. Investors reports will tell you the strategy, the buzzwords. So if one company uses IST versus ITT, or you can actually understand the vernacular of the company, the mission and the values of the company, the structure of the company. And I've seen candidates that have used things like that, and it completely differentiates them. So it's, you know, we'll be able to give people tips and tricks on how to build that.
And these are the types of things they'll learn on the courses.
Yeah.
And the other thing I tell all of my students is really look at the mission, vision and values of the company that you're applying for a role, and make sure that they are aligning with your own personal values as well, because you won't fit. There'll be a disconnect if that's not the case, and so you really need to make sure that they're aligned.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, and although some of it, you know, to some people might seem obvious, it's not things that people always think about. So yeah, no, great advice.
I think I'm going to just add a little bit as well, because one thing we've not mentioned is the movement of medical affairs from where it used to be as a support function to a strategic. The reason Medwise has got a double helix is because we think medical affairs should be the genome, the DNA of a company, and coding the company, coding the way it behaves. And I think it's really important for people to understand where medical affairs is going, where it is now. And so, in some companies, the medical teams launch products all the way through. But you know, you're going to need to be good at AI. You're not going to be able to not use AI. You're going to need digital acumen. Like there's currently 2 zettabytes of patient information data, 2 zettabytes in the world today that we can access. That's ridiculous. That's 21 zeros. My first computer was a ZX Spectrum in the early 80s that had a 56 kilobyte memory. You literally need 122 quadrillion of them computers to house the data that we've got today. Medical affairs is going to be data driven. And it probably isn't as much as it is going to be yet. So we need data experts, we need patient experts, we need communicators. We're going to need all these new skills. And so I don't even know what they are, because they're yet to arrive. But I can tell you one thing: we'll keep up with them, and these will be on our competency framework before anybody else's, because this is a living, breathing, evolving mission.
Oh, very important, I think. And I wanted to understand from your perspective, if someone's already in industry and they're perhaps feeling a little bit stuck in their role at the moment, what kind of advice would you give to them?
To do some of that self-reflection, again, and I encourage all my students to do that, to set themselves some goals, really see where they want to go, and what their own skill sets are, what they can build on to move to another future state that they might want to move to, and then come out and try and find ways to fill those gaps and help them move along.
Yep.
You've mentioned growth mindset. So I think, you know, the advice I give to people: you never be in a comfort zone in medical affairs. Comfort zones are fine, but nothing ever grows there. And I think really stepping out and challenging yourself, and if you don't feel challenged on a daily basis, you should never be at the top of a learning curve. I mean, it's awful to be at the bottom, but you should just never be at the top, and you don't need to in the industry. There's always things you can do to develop yourself, and I think if you're one of them, happy to be stale at home and just never, don't go into the industry. It's the wrong career for you.
The first thing I'd say is take a holiday, because you get a better perspective on what's happening, and really understanding around what is it that's making you stuck. Is it yourself? Is it that the size of the company means there isn't an opportunity and it's really waiting for like somebody to retire or to leave? Or is it that you haven't been networking enough to see what other possibilities and opportunities there are? You may decide that you want to do another course, train yourself, because that could open up opportunities. But I think distancing yourself from the problem a little bit gives you better perspective to make good decisions. And that holiday can be like taking an extra Friday or a Monday off. I'm not saying 2 weeks and go to the Maldives, right? Which would be lovely, but not really realistic. But it really means like turning your company phone off, actually stepping out, and rather than keep getting those emails which are compounding what's annoying you, making you feel stuck, getting away from that and then trying to reflect on what you really enjoy about the job. Has the job changed? So do you need to change, or do you need to change jobs? Or is it temporary and you get perspective, oh, it's only 1 more month and it's back to the good stuff? I think the perspective is really helpful.
Well, that is all for today, and that has been absolutely fascinating. I'm sure Erin and Davina and our listeners agree as well. But that's all for today's episode of Medical Musings. Thank you to Matt, Orin and Daniel for sharing your insights. If you are looking for more information on the courses discussed today, please connect separately with Dan, Orin and Matt, and we will input some links there for our listeners too, so you've got something straight to go to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you to our listeners as well. And don't forget to add HPG Engage to your favourites and join us next time for more industry insights. And also, if you are looking for your next career move, do visit us on www.hpgconnect.com.
Until then, take care and stay tuned for the next episode of Medical Musings. Yay!
Yay.